Andrew Stotz.
Yes,
Are
sir.
you pumped or what?
I am ready to rock.
Ready to rock. Andy, just before we get started, if you're tuning in on LinkedIn or Facebook or YouTube, drop in the comments, say hello, let us know where you're tuning in from. As always, we want Monday Night Live to be interactive. We're going to be bouncing off you guys, ask questions as we go. But start by letting us know where you're tuning in from. I know we always get some people from all around Australia and around the world. Which, you know, Andy's based in Bangkok. So Sawadee Cup.
Sawadee Cup to you and everybody.
I was fortunate enough to meet Andy on his podcast, My Worst Investment Ever. Andy's got a really impressive background in the finance world, but also as an entrepreneur. He's done a lot with public speaking, coaching, and there's a lot I do know, and there's also a lot I don't know. So, Andy, tell us where it all began.
Well, I was 14 years old and was my parents filed charges of incorrigibility against me, and basically I got locked up as a kid outside of Cleveland, Ohio. So I started at a young age with a good family and all that, but I got caught up in drugs basically, and it caused me to do a lot of bad stuff. So there I was, 14 years old. Eventually I got back home and started to figure out other ways to get high and other ways to get in trouble that didn't get me in jail. And eventually, though I did by the age of 17, try to kill myself. And then basically I asked for help, and I went to one rehab for drug addiction. We're talking about 1982. And basically at that rehab, everything went well. I got out of that rehab, and in 4 days I was on my knees begging a friend of mine to give me some weed to get started again. And that's when I got started again. Luckily, my parents said, no, you got to get back into another treatment center. I went to another one, and then they put me in another one. So I had 3 different treatment centers for almost a year of my life. But in June of 1983, I walked out of the treatment center at the age of 17, and I was clean and sober. And I had rebooted my life in an unbelievable sort of way. And I've been clean and sober since that time. So some of your audience may know about 12-step programs and stuff like that. But that's really, I was lucky because my parents, what they said is they brought up the bottom, basically, and made me suffer the consequences of what I was doing. And it just got me straight. So I don't drink. I don't get high or anything like that. I love to see other people. I know you got a nice glass of wine. My mother loves a good glass.
I feel bad now. Yeah.
You don't have to feel bad. In fact, a cannabis company has come to me and asked me to work with them. And I said, well, the good news is I won't be smoking your inventory.
So how many years has that been now, clean and sober?
Nearly 40 years, almost 40 years.
Wow, well done. Yeah. That's very impressive. Well done.
Yeah, so that's kind of where it started. And then I didn't have any money. I would relay a story about that time. When I got out of rehab, basically my mom in particular, but my parents basically said, you got to move out. And we don't want to deal with you getting high again or anything like that. You've got to move out and you got to make it on your own. And I remember that day when my dad and I packed up my stuff and I moved into a tiny little room in Kent, Ohio. And basically I got on my knees and sobbed in that room because I just didn't have anything except, I was out on my own. But I did have my sobriety. I did have my friendships. And so every day I went to a factory. It took me an hour to drive there on a little moped that I had. I just laugh when I think about it. And then I made minimum wage in America working in a factory. I came back home. I had nothing. Sometimes I had to be on food stamps and all that. But what I did have, and this is an important thing that's been critical throughout my life, is that I had happiness. Every night I went out with my friends and we went to 12-step meetings and we went to different activities. We were all clean and sober and we were just having a good life that I never really had. And I was living that at the age of 18. And it taught me a lesson that later in my life, when I lost everything, I learned at that lesson at 18, I learned that you can be happy and have nothing. I don't want to have nothing. I want to have stuff, but darn it, if I'm going to lose everything, I know now that I can have lost it all and still have happiness, friendship, and family. And so that was a big defining lesson for me at the age of 18.
And what age did you get into finance?
So basically, at that time, I had no money. There's just no way. There's no way I could even afford to go to university. I didn't even think about it. So, but there was a lady named Catherine O'Brien from the Ohio State Department of Rehabilitation, and she managed to come up with a $500 grant for me, and I got started in school. I went for one term, and then I quit, and I thought I can do this on my own. And then I went out and tried to work, and I realized no, you can't. You got to get an education. So that got me back into school. I'm the type of guy that's stubborn. Just I don't learn unless I do it and mess up. But the point is that I got back in, and eventually, I remember one course, and I've been teaching finance myself as a university lecturer as well as just in my own courses. When I was in university, basically, I walked into this course. There was 200 students in the room. The economics professor came walking in, and he said, "I'm going to cut this room down the middle. There's 100 on each side. By the end of this course, 100 of you are going to be gone, and 100 that remain, I'll give 10 A's. Let's get started." And I just thought, damn, I can't remember that guy's name or anything, but it was that moment. That was my defining moment that I said, I'm going to get an A in this. And that's when I learned how to study. That's when I started to really get serious. And then I moved to California, and I ended up doing a bachelor's degree in finance and an MBA also in finance. Went to work for Pepsi, had a great corporate career, moving up the ladder as a young guy. And then I sold everything I owned, took an 80% pay cut, and moved to Thailand with $2,000 in my pocket and $20,000 of student loan debt. And all my bank accounts in America closed, my car sold, all of my possessions gone. It was a one-way trip. And I never left. I've been here for 30 years now.
30 years. Wow. But you've been lecturing in finance for 25 years, haven't you?
Yeah, so I arrived in Thailand with a job as a teacher. And I see we have some people on the line, like there's Panda, Sarika from India, and she knows that teachers, I don't know about India, but I know in Thailand, teachers don't make any money. And so after 1 year of teaching finance in Thailand, I realized I have to start to get a job and make some serious money. And so I went and applied, and I had this undergrad in finance and MBA, and I walked into a broker in 1993 and met a guy named John Shrimpton, who basically hired me on the spot. He said, "You're probably the most qualified guy in this town." And the stock market was booming. It was an exciting time. John later left and started a investment bank in Vietnam, and then moved to New Zealand and became a very big landholder there. But that was when I sat down at my job. I was about 27, 28 years old at the time. And I realized this is the job for me. And I can literally feel that first day that when I sat down and he said, tomorrow morning by 7 a.m., you need to have a summary of the market news on my desk. It cannot be late. And I went in so early that morning, and I was just so pumped up, and I just loved it. And I love the energy. I love trying to dig into things, try to understand things. And I've realized at that moment until today, I am an analyst. I like to analyze things. I do not accept what people say. I do not accept the conventional this or that. You cannot make money in the stock market or in life if all you're doing is just following everybody else. And so that's really when I found my passion. And I've been an analyst ever since.
Interesting. Yeah. Well, I did some investment analysis when I was at university, a part-time job. I don't know if you know the story. My dad was in investment management in Hong Kong, so I used to analyze charts for him and stuff, and he had these like stop loss system and all this sort of stuff. So I learned a little bit about technical analysis. And then I
remember a little bit about your story and how you had to kind of make a break from that and try to come up with follow your own passion.
And exactly. But so the GFC was it 2007, 2008?
2007, 2008. Yeah.
Yeah. See, I was in Phuket, Thailand, 2005, 2006, 2007, and it was booming, man. Like, I remember one week we sold 14 properties in a week. I was like, amazing. And I was straight out of university. Yeah, well, I was making a lot of money straight out of university, and I just thought this is it's only going to get better from here. And then the GFC hit, tsunami, military coup. What else? There was a couple of other things, all happened at once, and I ended up moving to Hong Kong.
Yeah, well, I'm sure you got a lot of your listeners out there that have been to Thailand and know about Thailand. I've lived here now 30 years, and I just love it. And and people always ask me, what do you like about Thailand? And what I like is people. People are great. And I know in many other countries people are great, but I know Thai people very well. I speak the language. I understand things well. I understand business here well. So I enjoy it very much.
Yeah. Well, one of the things that really stuck with me, we're getting a bit off topic now, but I think it's important to mention about the Thai people is the way they bounced back from that tsunami. I remember I came over a week after it happened. And my intention, I hadn't seen my dad and my little brother in about a week. In about a year. And it was a week after the tsunami. Sorry, got my words mixed up then. And, they were still like dragging bodies out from underneath buildings, and cars were stuck in third stories, the third floors of hotels. And the place was a mess. But like you'd walk along the beach, and the Thai lady that worked at the local stall on the beach who sold water and coconuts to tourists was running up, like giving us her last few water bottles that she had to make sure we were all right. I mean, the way that they handled that and the way they bounced back from that, it was so inspiring. I'll never forget that.
Yeah, I mean, Thai people. The thing I like about Thai people is that relationships are number one priority, and I think it's a lot in Asia in general. But it's part of why I moved here, because I really like the fact that, they put a lot of value on relationships. And so that it's not just profit, it's not just business, but relationships are critical. If a Thai person's working in an office and it's miserable, they're not going to stay around for that. And whereas, a typical Westerner may decide, I'll put up with it just to make the money. I was thinking about the other thing you were probably thinking about was after the tsunami and all the other things was also a flood. Where many people don't know, but the whole area from Chiang Mai to Bangkok is a floodplain, and they release waters out of the dams that cause a massive flood. So that was 2011 that we had the flood. That was pretty horrific. I mean, Thailand's had its share. I have a friend of mine. He had a factory burnt to the ground. He rebuilt it, and then he had a flood, and the factory filled up with 2 meters of water. It's like, and then he rebuilt it again. I was like, you are a freaking Iron Man.
Yeah. Well, so you've been there a long time, and your mum's living there now.
Yeah. So about 5 years ago, my father called me and asked me to come and help take care of my mom a bit. And basically over the last 3 years before my dad died, I had been going home every 6 months and working 1 month at my parents' house. Meanwhile, I was running my businesses. I was working on my Ph.D. I was also the president of CFA Society for Financial Analysts here in Thailand. And I did all that while I was, going back and forth. Those were the days when we used to travel. And I came to take care of my mom. My mom was in a rehab hospital after having a stroke. She was in very bad condition. So I would be with her in the afternoons and evenings, put her to bed. And then I would come home and see my dad. And then in the morning, we'd hang out a little bit. And he was about 80 years old at the time. And then we were out on the golf course one day. It's only a few days after I was back. And then we went out for coffee. We went out for lunch, took some cool pictures. And then I went to take care of mom. And I told him, I'm going to go take care of mom. I came back and my dad had a massive seizure and he was in his chair. I got him to the hospital, but he deteriorated very quickly. And then within 12 days, he was gone. And during that time, I was taking care of my mom at the rehab hospital, then back to ICU with my dad. And I was going back and forth. And then I lost my dad. And I just told my dad, don't worry about mom. Just let go. Just let go. You've done everything, And I believe that part of that sobriety that I got at a young age and the family, and my parents standing by me and helping me, but not enabling me, kicking my butt, that really made me a better person. And I also, I just got a message. I always get it from my Thai friends that say, I really appreciate the way you take care of your mother. And I said, I learned it from you. And I think if I hadn't have been brought up in Thailand, now I've been in Thailand almost 30 years and, I'm 55. So that means I have more years in Thailand than I had in the US. it just taught me that when it came time for my mom, also another very important thing, my mother was on 10 different medicines, and I could just see, I was reading as an analyst, right? As an analyst, I analyzed all of her medicines. I looked at all the side effects, the contraindications, and I just said to the doctor, this medicine is making her more sick. And you're giving her more medicines to treat side effects of the existing medicines. Is there any way that we can start reducing some of this to get her back to health? And he said, no. And that's when I really realized, I have no respect for what I experienced in the medical system in America. It's all about drugs. It's all about a pill. It's all about a quick solution. And, patients want it too. Everybody wants a pill. If somebody could give me a pill that would make me have 6-pack abs, you'd be a fool to not take it. But, what if it said, okay, you can get your 6-pack ab, but it's going to take 5 years off your life. Are you ready to do it? Well, some people may. But that's when I brought my mom to Thailand 5 years ago and said, I'm going to use. So being an analyst, I got every book on nutrition I could possibly get. I track all my mom's vitals through a Fitbit. Plus we do, blood pressure and many different things that I do throughout the day with the team here. And I monitored her, her recovery basically. And I got her off of all 10 medicines except one, which was related to her thyroid. But almost all these things could be solved by, you have high blood pressure, beetroot juice. I learned so much. And so now my mother is much better condition. She's got her brain back, and she's, great. So yeah, mom lives with me, and she's my number one fan for my podcast, My Worst Investment Ever.
Wow. Yeah, my mum is my number one fan for Monday Night Live, so there you go. She always watches the recording though.
Okay, so hi mom.
Definitely my number one fan, so I could relate. But that's very inspiring. Like one of the things after we did the podcast is connected with you on Instagram, and I see you post you're having lunch with your mum, and I think it's inspiring for a lot of people to see. So yeah.
Yeah, I think it's an important lesson that I've learned is that you've got time now, today. Call your mom or dad, spend time with them. You just never know when that's going to be gone. So there's a lot of people that send me messages and say, I called my mom today because I saw you with your mom. Oh. And so that's just, beautiful. So for everybody that's listening, I challenge you, Monday Night Live, send your mom, your dad a message, give them a call, tell them you love them. You never know, because you will not be able to do that forever. And now I live a life with my mom where we talk about everything, and I just have no regrets. And she and I talk about when she dies, what I'm going to do and how I'm going to take care of her, the funeral and all that. And we talk about, just there's no regrets. I have no baggage. I have no regrets. So I really challenge people to let go of that baggage, reach out, build that relationship, and just dig into it. And then, it's just great for me. That's been my experience.
Yeah, and thank you so much for sharing all that with us. You've been very open and vulnerable, which I really appreciate, and I'm sure everyone listening in does as well. So LinkedIn user is obviously a fan of yours, Andrew. Yeah, I don't know who it is.
Yes.
I'm not sure who this is.
I appreciate it.
They don't always come. They always come.
There you
go. We got. Yeah, drop in the comments, guys. Let me know as we go. Like if you want to share like some feedback, or you want to share a story of your own, we'll bring it up on the screen. But Andrew, one of the most inspiring things that happened on our last interview when you interviewed me is you shared this story about the story I'm talking about.
I'm trying to remember which one I told. I remember that it was impactful, but I can't remember which one.
I'm trying to word it in a way which doesn't spoil it for everyone else. But you went through. It started when your sister wasn't well,
right?
And you found some inspiration somewhere where you didn't expect it. I'm wondering if you wouldn't mind sharing that story with the audience tuning in today.
Well, I mean, basically, I was riding high in Thailand. It was a great time in 1996, 1997. Things were booming. And then all of a sudden we had the crash in 1998. And I had started a coffee business, a factory with my best friend Dale. And he was running it while I was generating the cash flow as an investment banker and, riding high. And then basically the economy started to crash. And then we could see that our coffee business was going to be under tremendous pressure. We would lose almost all of our customers and not be able to grow significantly. And then one day I lost my job in the beginning of 1998 in April. And basically at that time, we basically went to the landlord and said 50% rent cut or else we have to move. They said, well, we're not going to cut the rent that much. And so we moved into the factory. And we lived in the factory in a tiny little room because the factory's not air conditioned, just that one room was, or the rooms that we had offices. We put 2 beds in that room and then we just tried to survive. And I learned a lesson. There's a great book I would recommend, which is called, the guy's name is Gary Sutton, and it's called The Turnaround. And basically that book is awesome because it tells you the most important thing when you're in an economic crisis, when you're in a business crisis, is the one thing you can control today is your costs. So we learned that. We cut all of our costs. We stayed in the factory. We just huddled up. And then one day in August of 1998, it was a Sunday morning. It was a gloomy day. It had been raining all morning. If you can imagine the tropical smell of this tropical rain all day long. And, here we are losing everything. And then the phone rings and my sister said that her cancer has returned and could I come home and see her before she died, which they said would be within a month. When I hung up the phone, I just cried. I just sobbed, and Dale sobbed, and we just looked at each other. We'd been friends since we were about 14 back in Ohio. And there we were, on the outskirts of Bangkok in a factory with not really much going on. And then to have this personal loss, I got on the airplane very quickly and got home and had a week with my sister. I was just looking at some pictures of the time that I had then. But something happened when I got in. Now, when I arrived at my sister's house, she was already in bed all the time, and I went up into the bed and I climbed into the bed. She was very happy to see me. I climbed into the bed with her, gave her a big hug, and then I just started sobbing. And she looked at me and she said this, which I'll never forget. That doesn't help me. And it was just such a impactful moment where I realized that her death was all about me, for me. What does this mean to me? What does this mean that I can't call my sister anymore? What does this mean if my sister's not in my life anymore? And I really didn't think about it, from her perspective. And I think that really, really changed me as a person, just as, just that simple thing that she said. And that really is kind of the foundation of how I started to think more about other people and try to put myself in other people's shoes. And so within a week, unfortunately, my sister passed away. I was depressed. I came back to Thailand, and she had 3 daughters, and, it was just tragic to watch it all. And ultimately, those 3 daughters, what I ended up doing was when they graduated from high school, I flew back from Thailand with $3,000 in my pocket. And I gave each of them on their high school graduation $3,000, but I said, you can't spend it. We're going to set up an investment account, and I'm going to teach you everything I can about investing so that you can build your own wealth. And that was really the beginning of the book that I wrote called How to Start Building Your Wealth, Investing in the Stock Market. And the online course that I do is really what I taught my nieces of how to get started investing. So I have 5 nieces, 2 from my other sister. They've all followed it. And it's not my primary business, but I love the course and I love to get people in it. And then we have a Facebook group where people are asking specific questions about their cases. So that's a little bit of the story that we talked about on the show.
Yeah, but you mentioned you went to an orphanage, right? You did some volunteering.
Yeah, that's where when I came back, I was really depressed. And basically, I remember that a counselor said to me when I was in my rehab, he said, like, what are you doing today? And I'm like, I'm sitting on the couch. And he said, you can't think your way into better acting. You have to act your way into better thinking.
Well, that's huge.
Yeah. He's like, get up, do it. Let's go, move, make it happen, do something, wash the dishes. And that really, really resonated to me. Now, sometimes you have to think of things the other way, where you have to kind of, you have to think about something. But I know when I'm in depression, when I'm depressed, when I'm facing a hard time, like I know people watching this it's a freaking hard time right now.
It is.
Sometimes, you can't think your way out. How many times have we woken up in the middle of the night thinking, how am I going to pay the bills? How am I going to do this? How am I going to get this? I got to take care of my mother. I've got 2 businesses here and I've got all of this stuff. How am I going to do it? Sometimes our minds just, really destroy us. And so that's when we've got to act. So I went and I found an orphanage. I went to it and I asked them, could I, help in some way? I didn't really want to teach English because I don't know much about that. And I always joke that I'm not really good at it. I'm good at speaking it, but I'm not good at teaching it. So I just went and played with the kids, and the kids wanted to play basketball and kickball and all this stuff. And the owners of this orphanage basically told me they had pictures of each kid's intake, because each kid was a case with the police, where the kid was violently abused, sexually abused. I mean, it was horrific. And this guy would go rescue these kids in Thailand. And he told me, he said, one problem about Thai parents is that sometimes they see their children as their property. And that taught me, a real interesting lesson. But what I remember is that there was this one kid, and I knew his story was horrific. Sexual violence, physical violence, being basically thrown out from his family. And here he was, I don't know, 9 years old. And he started playing ball with me, and we were just 2 of us throwing ball back and forth. And, just thinking about it right now, it's just so powerful, because he just had such a fun time throwing that ball. And I just thought to myself, you have every right to just crawl up into a corner and cry. But there's just something in human nature to just have fun, engage, make the most of it. And that little 9-year-old kid showed it to me right there. And it was that encounter with that kid, that just basically got me thinking, like, what's my problem? What is my problem? And I challenge everybody on this, to think, what is your problem? Just go to the nearby hospital and walk in there, and you're going to find a number of people where today is their last day, and they know it. They do anything to have your problem. So, not to minimize the problems that we face, but sometimes we have to act our way by helping other people, getting involved with other people, and just give, and then things will be taken care of.
Yeah, wow. Woo! What a story.
It's amazing that kid, just like, you just see the positive power of children, of youth. And, truthfully, the world is full of a lot of negative adult power these days.
Yeah.
A lot of it. Go on social media. Look at all the debates that are going on. Adults are ruining things. And kids, kids can't even just go play and have fun and bring their positive energy into life. It gets crushed.
Yeah. And those kids have been, through some of the most violent, horrific experiences that anyone could possibly experience.
Yeah.
And they just want to have fun.
Yeah.
Amazing. Andy, I really appreciate all your vulnerability, by the way. Like, we don't see enough of this in the world, whether it's on my Monday Night Live, we just don't see enough of it, full stop. So I really appreciate it. I know it takes a lot of courage. And I know a lot of people listening, are very inspired by what you've shared with us. I'm curious to find out, and this might be a little bit selfish, but I want to find out more about what you do in business. Like, what are these online courses? I know you got a few of them.
Yep.
And I'd like to know more about your public speaking training, if that's something that you still do. Could you just give us an overview of what your businesses offer to people like myself, entrepreneurs, marketers, that kind of thing?
Yep. So I have two businesses in Thailand. The first one is Coffee Works, the coffee business that we managed to survive 26 years. And even to this day, COVID's trying to kill us, but we're never going to ever give up. We've been through it all. So Dale's on that full time, and I'm running what's called Stotz Investment Research. And basically what we do is we do research, and we also develop research tools. And we go to institutions and we help them to be more efficient in their research of companies. What is this company worth? Should I buy Tesla? How much should I pay for it? That type of stuff. That's the type of research that we do. So I started the valuation masterclass many years ago, combining all my years of teaching how to value a stock with this concept of, my experience of valuing stocks, and ended up having about 2,000 students in that. And that's for young people that really want to become experts in valuation. And recently I started the boot camp, valuation masterclass boot camp, which is just badass, really tough, 6 weeks, very, very tough, but to get the young people who really, really want to build a career. So that's number one. Number two is the book that I wrote. It's on Amazon, but also through the course, How to Start Building Your Wealth Investing in the Stock Market. And that one's for beginners who just want to learn how to invest. But, they're not, my nieces are never going to watch CNBC. They are never, ever going to pull up a chart of the stock market. So I designed that course for someone that really is making good money, but just needs a simple, easy way to build their wealth over time. And I teach in the course that you create, grow, and then protect your wealth. You create your wealth through business, through your salary, whatever it is that you create your wealth. Stock market is not where we create wealth. It is where we grow wealth. And all people the worldwide, they listen to my podcast, My Worst Investment Ever, to know how to protect their wealth. So that course, How to Start Building Your Wealth Investing in the Stock Market, is beginner.
I'm curious. When you say making good money, what do you mean exactly? Like, how much money does somebody need to be making, do you think, before they start growing their wealth in the stock market?
Well, I would say that the first thing is that there's one surefire way to make money in the stock market is to leave it in the stock market for decades. There's just there's no other way that guaranteed. Now, I'm not saying leave it in one stock, because that one stock could go bust. But let's just say you bought a fund that owned every stock in the stock market, and then you held it for 30 years. You went away somewhere, you forgot about it, and 30 years later you opened up. You're going to be freaking rich, because the power of compounding. And the power of compounding only works when you don't take anything out of it. Most people don't realize that. They take money out and then they lost the power of compounding. So that's the first thing that I try to get across, and that is, that. And what does that mean? That means you got to start now. So $100, $50, $300, $1,000. You have to start with something as soon as possible, and that's what I teach in the course. Is here's the foundation. Now you need to ask these questions. Find the place where you're going to start. Find out what the absolute minimum is. I always have my students start with the minimum. If this bank or this brokerage or wherever it is you eventually start to trade at and invest at says your minimum is, let's say, $500, that's what you put in. You don't put in any more. Just get started.
Okay. So they don't necessarily have to be killing it in your career yet. Now's the time to start.
Correct.
You get into the habits now. You start with the minimum, develop the skills, and then obviously if your income grows, then your portfolio grows.
Yep, and you keep contributing. Now, some people say, "Oh, Andrew, I want to work. I want to invest in individual stocks and learn all about that." Yeah, I can tell you. I also have a Ph.D. in finance, and so I've read probably 500 academic papers, including having written them myself, and having worked in the field of finance now for 30 years. I can tell you that majority of professional fund managers do not beat the market.
Yeah.
Now there are some advantages that an individual has if you really want to be a stock picker, but I spend 24/7.
It's high risk, isn't it?
Stocks. Yeah, and so for the majority of people, building as I always tell people, I want to pick stocks. I said, just build up $100,000, $200,000 worth of assets in a simple fund, and then you take 10,000. But don't start with the 10,000 and start losing it right away.
Okay, and what about the public speaking stuff? Sorry, if you're not finished, continue.
I have another. Basically, when I started as an analyst, and I listened to the best analysts that I could find, around me, what I saw was the best analysts were great public speakers. They were great speakers.
Right.
And I started reading everything I could, and then every time I could, I would take notes. And I would try to improve myself in my speaking. And I read everything, I watched everything, and I asked people to give me feedback, and I took every opportunity to speak. And after all of those years, and then I was a head of research, running research teams where I was giving feedback to the juniors that were presenting. And basically, I take notes, and eventually I created a course, called How to Become a Great Presenter and Increase Your Influence, which is what it's all about. And basically, I teach a few things, but I would say one thing I would share with the listeners and the viewers is what I teach in there is the PESO format. And it's particularly good for what I basically say is that I have my students take a little test to see if they're left brain or right brain. And what I am logical left, 86% logical left. And a lot of other people are romantic right. Right? Where they're more emotional and all that story. And I basically say, the problem is that if you're a romantic right, what's your presentation? Yeah. What's your presentation going to look like? It's going to look like a right brain presentation. And if you're logical left, your presentation is going to look like a logical left presentation. And guess what? You're going to leave half the audience wanting, missing, not satisfied. Because a logical left person is going to listen to your story and they're going to go, bullshit, tell me the facts, give me the proof. I want to see the evidence. And when you go up, as a guy like me goes up and goes, here's my evidence to this. And then the romantic right, they're going to say, this is boring, man. Just all this stuff, all these numbers. So the PESO format is what I teach in there. And it basically says, number one, what's your point? Let's just say this stock is cheap, right? Number two, E in PESO, what's your evidence to appeal to the logical left? Well, it's trading on a PE of 8 times, and the industry is trading on a PE of 15 times. And then, so we have the point, we have the evidence, and the S is what's your story?
Yeah.
So my story in this particular case is that it's taken me 3 years to find a stock this cheap relative to its industry. And then the O in the PESO format is objection. You got to anticipate the objection. Someone's going to say, oh, that stock's always cheap. It's always going to be cheap. You got to anticipate that. So what's your point? What's your evidence? What's your story? And how are you going to handle the objections? And that's a lot of what I teach in there. I teach other tips like I start almost every presentation of a large audience. I always start with Q&A. I never end with Q&A. I always start with Q&A. So I teach a lot of little tips and tricks of some kind of advanced stuff that I love to do. So, yeah.
Yeah. And is this a fully online course?
Correct. Fully online.
Okay. I'll have to check it out.
I can share it with you, and you can share it with the audience. So so we have Valuation Masterclass. We have how to start building your wealth investing in the stock market. We have this presentation course. So you can see that I just build courses around the things that I just really know and I'm passionate about. Well, when I was 24 years old and I was living in Los Angeles, I stumbled across a guy that was the father of the quality movement. His name was W. Edwards Deming. And I convinced my bosses to let me go to a seminar of his. And I sat in the front row with 500 people in a room in awe. The man was 89 years old, and he was just full of energy teaching about quality mindset. Dr. Deming was amazing. He was so amazing that I basically went back again and took another course when he was 92. And he passed away when he was 93 in 1993. He was born in 1900. So I wanted to bring his teachings to my staff at the coffee business. So I wrote a book called Transform Your Business with Dr. Deming's 14 Points. And I try to explain his points in a simple, easy to understand way. I've translated into Thai, I've translated into Chinese, and I sell it in English.
Wow.
It's available on Amazon, but I also have a course. So for those people that are running business and think,
Wow.
yeah, there's got to be a better way. There's got to be a better way. You know, nowadays, Dr. Deming would be appalled with what we see now. I see people that are sitting behind computers thinking that they're managers by managing KPIs of all their employees, and almost like they don't even see the employee as an individual. And all that employee knows is you just got to hit your KPIs. You know, that's it. And how much missed opportunity are we getting in this world, in our business, because we're not taking time to understand the potential of our people, and instead we're treating them like robots. And so I teach a lot of that in the online course and in the book. So we have the Valuation Masterclass, How to Start Building Your Wealth, the great presentation course, and then Transform Your Business with Dr. Deming's 14 points. And then I have another one called Finance Made Ridiculously Simple. And that's my way of trying to explain what is a balance sheet, what is an income statement, what are ratios, how do you understand it for your own business? And, you know, that's another course that I do. I also have a course called Achieve Your Goals. And it's really, I created my own book that's a planner book. And it's a hardback book. I don't sell it. I just print it up for myself and the people around me. But I wrote a whole course with all that's in that book. So that's another one that I do. So I just, every time I come upon something that has worked for me, that I understand well, I put it into a course and then I teach it and I sell it.
Yeah, it seems like you got like, you really got addicted to learning at some point, and then it's translated into an addiction to teaching. Well, I don't know if addiction's the right word, but
obsession,
passion, yeah,
passion. That sounds so friendly. I would say more like obsession. When I get into something, you know, like just even in this COVID time, you know, the number of academic papers that I've read about COVID, the writing that I've done about it, you know, if I look at, you know, so many different topics, I just go deep into them. I'm an analyst. And like I said, from day one, when I sat down at that job, and if there's any young person there listening to this, or a person who's sitting in a job that you're not satisfied with, my point is there is a place for you. You got to search. You got to work. Sometimes you got to quit the things that aren't working, because remember, what we do know is what doesn't work, because it's not working for us right now. What we don't always know is what is going to work in the future. So sometimes we just have to leave the things that don't work, and that will free up space in the mind and in the spirit to find the things that will work. And I'm an analyst. That worked for me, and it still works for me.
I got a couple more questions I want to ask before we wrap up.
Yep.
Are you still involved with the 12-step community? AA
Definitely.
Or is it
definitely.
AA or NA? I don't know which one.
All of them.
Yeah.
You know. Basically, we have a lot of meetings. So if anybody's ever in trouble in Bangkok, also if anybody's listening to this is ever in trouble with alcohol and drugs, or knows someone who is, there is an answer through AA, NA, 12-step program. So reach out. When I came to Thailand, there was one meeting in one location every single day of the week. Now we have many, many meetings across Thailand. But the point is, the 12 steps are just some structure that we can use to live our lives. Yeah,
fantastic. And the podcast. Tell us a little bit about that. And I want to know also, how many episodes are you up to now?
Well, that's a good question. Let's just go back to 2018. I was trying to think about what I could do to be a podcaster, and in the world of finance, you know, thinking about marketing, you know, your expertise. And I know a lot of people listening know a lot about marketing. I don't know much about marketing, but what I do know, I have a whole stack of books up there, maybe 50 books that I read on military strategy in different battles. And what I do know is you never, ever attack your opponent at their strength. You always attack at their weakness. And so what I did, I knew I'm a small guy in Bangkok. I wanted to have a global impact. So I came up with this idea of my worst investment ever, and asking people to share that story. I sent out an email to my list, and I asked if people would be willing to share their story. And I thought, this is the type of topic that you don't expect to get much email return on.
I love how you say not a marketer, because this is like the best marketing headline for a podcast.
Yeah,
Anyway,
exactly.
keep going.
So then the point is that I sent out that message, and then I ended up getting 500 written stories sent back to me. And so that's when I started the podcast. I just simply interview people and let them tell their story. And you were episode 263, and now I'm up to episode 415. I've just released Joy Abdullah out of Malaysia just came out today, and so that's 400.
How often are you doing these interviews?
So I release 3 a week roughly. I really want to go to 5, but time. So yeah.
That's amazing, because they're so professionally produced. You got you obviously got a team to supporting you.
Well, I'm just a structured guy, basically.
Because when I've applied for some podcasts, right, they're like, send me a link to like one of your most professional podcasts, and I'm like, I send them to your one all the time. I'm like, yeah, this looks really good. It's got all the transcripts, and it looks fantastic.
All there. So I see we got something from Amber here. Is that on LinkedIn? Interesting.
Yeah. Well, she first of all said, "What a beautiful story," which I thought I'd bring up first.
Thank you, Amber.
And then she said, with all of your experience, do you have any advice for business owners about how they can go about getting investment from angel investors for projects that lead to big change in revenue? Great question, Amber.
Sure. And I have clients that I work with. I have one client right now that's basically a corn business in Thailand and trying to expand that. They want to raise about $40 million. So they're pretty significant. And I work with a lot of startup companies. The first thing is that, you got to have a story. It's got to be a clear, compelling story. The number of people that do not have a great story, it's amazing. So that's the first thing. What I help people do is craft those stories, because also I'm on the other side listening a lot of times, and I know what needs to be in that story, and it needs to be simple and clear. The second thing is that forget the numbers. You need to communicate the emotion of what you're doing, the excitement of the transformation in this world for your clients, that you're doing. And that is a big mistake, because a lot of people think, I got to get the numbers. No, you got to get them to buy into the dream. So that's the second thing. The third thing is that when it comes down to getting the money, a rich man or woman or a rich organization that wants to give you money, they're going to hand it off to a financial guy like me, and they're going to rip you apart. And you need to have your financials together. And what I touch, and that's part of what I help some startups do. But the point that I make about it is that start with revenue. That's it. Make a clear forecast of what the potential revenue is going to be. So Amber, that would be my, some of my main points, more generally of what you can do. But build a dream, and the dream comes with revenue. Forget about the cost and the profits. Don't worry about that too much. Get that revenue story down.
Great, yeah. Very good advice. Well, we've come time to, unfortunately, call it a wrap, Andrew. Thanks so much for being here. I've got a lot of value.
Pleasure.
I'm sure the audience has as well. For everyone tuning in, any of you in Perth on Thursday night, we've got the 7 steps to LinkedIn influence. If you haven't got your tickets, head on to Meetup or Eventbrite and get your tickets, because we're going to have a bit of a party on Thursday night at WeWork in the city. Wish you were here for it, Andy. Exciting.
I would love to be there. And I really, I am not a marketing guy. And so I like to watch what you're doing and follow your LinkedIn. So I appreciate, what you're doing. I appreciate you having me on.
No worries. Everybody have a great week in business. We'll see you next week on Monday Night Live.